In this video, I'm going to show how you can build an invoice PDF generation app using Airtable Interfaces. You can see here I'm in the Interfaces tab and I can choose from a bunch of customers here. I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri. I can add in items that are going to be shown in the invoice. So let's say driving lesson, price $1,000, quantity 1, and then steering wheel, price of product 200, quantity 2. And then when I click on this Create Invoice PDF button, that's going to kick off an Airtable automation. That's going to create a PDF of an invoice based on this data, and it's going to upload it here. You can see there, that's what it looks like. And this is also going to be available in the Data tab in my Airtable base. Again, looking for Oscar Piastri, looking up the PDF of his invoice, and again, it has his name, his address, and the items we added in there. Now, interfaces can be really useful if you want people in your business to have access to some of the data in your database, but maybe not all of it. And maybe you want them to be able to do certain things, but not necessarily have full admin rights to your data. So with this specific interface that we built, users who only have access to this, they're going to be able to select a customer. They're going to be able to add in items, and they're going to be able to generate those PDFs of invoices, but they're not going to be able to edit, the data in this invoices table here. They're not going to be able to change the customer name, the address. And this is just a good way of ensuring that people don't have access to too much information, or no one accidentally kind of messes up the existing structure you have. So I'm going to cover all that in this video. Before we get into building out our interface, I want to go quickly through the backend or the database structure. So you can see here in our base, we have two tables, invoices and line items. The invoices table is really simple. We have customer names, we have an address, and then we have line items, grand total, and PDF. Line items is actually linked to the line items table. So you can see here we have a number of line items for our invoice that we're going to be creating. And if we add in a couple of line items for, let's say, Max Verstappen, let's put in materials and consultation. You can see here we're actually getting the sum of the totals of each of the line items in this grand total field. PDF is going to be an attachment field, and this is where our output invoice PDFs are actually going to be stored. So when we're building out our interface, I actually want the person on the finance team or whoever's using the app to be able to add line items themselves and generate invoice PDFs based on whatever they add. So I'm actually going to delete these for now, and I'm actually going to leave my line items table blank as well. So if I right click, delete all selected items. So we now have this invoices table with no line items linked to it. We have our grand total. We have our PDF field as well. I'm going to go over to interfaces and I'm going to click on build it yourself. You can of course use the AI feature, but just for the purposes of showing you how this works, I think it's a good idea to build it ourselves. So let's build our interface. I'm going to call it invoice generator. I'm going to give it this icon here. And there's a bunch of default layouts we could choose from. So list, gallery, Kanban, etc. But for our purposes today, I'm going to start with a blank canvas. So I'm going to finish on that. And then we're presented with this blank canvas. And what you'll see here is Airtable has automatically created a page within our interface or our app that we can use. We can drag and drop elements onto the canvas. I'm actually going to start off by renaming this particular page. So I'm going to call this dashboard and leave that there. Okay, the first thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add in a record picker. So I'm going to drag that up here. And this is going to allow us to effectively select whichever one of these records we want. And in our case, it's going to be the customer name. The reason we're automatically linking everything to the invoices table is that's what the source is set as. If we change this to line items, you'll see then we have nothing at the moment because there's no entries in that table. But in our case, we want to link it to the invoices table. I'm going to make it a bit smaller just so it doesn't take up too much space. And yeah, let's set Max Verstappen there by default. A nice feature of interfaces is you can preview as either yourself, or if you have any collaborators, you can look at them too. So I'm going to preview, and this is what we have at the moment. So obviously not much to write home about just yet, but we are very early. So let's go back, and now I'm going to add in, let's also add in the address, just a useful piece of information to have. So now if we test that out and we change to Lando Norris, you'll see he has a different address to Max Verstappen. Back into edit mode. And I also want to add in line items. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to choose, we have a bunch of options we can choose from here: field, grid, calendar, Kanban, and timeline. I actually think list might be one of the most useful formats for us here. So let's drop that in there. Get rid of this. And no items yet. So what I'm going to do is, just to show you how this would look if we actually did have entries in it, is I'm going to go back to my data. I'm going to go into line items and I'm manually going to add one. And let's say the price is 200 and the quantity is 5. And then if we go back to interfaces, you'll see now there's no items still. Do we need to refresh this? And then one more thing actually we forgot to do was to link that to a specific user. So let's add in for Max Verstappen there, materials. Then back in interfaces, you'll see that record is now showing up. Now, remember, we want the finance team, or again, whoever's going to be using this app, to be able to actually generate the invoices, and I want them to be able to add their own line items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and you'll see at the moment we do have editable selected, but we also need to check this option here to allow users to add or delete records inline. Because now if I do this and I go to preview, what we can do is we can change the name of materials to, let's just say, product. We can change the price of the product to 1,200, and that results in the total field as well getting updated. And these changes are going to be reflected in your actual data. So if I go back and go to line items, you'll see that has been updated. So this is really useful for letting other kind of users whom you may not want to give full access to the data layer, but you do want them to be able to do certain things. So for example, we don't want them to be able to, change the address associated with a customer, but we're happy for them to add in items or modify existing items so that they can generate their invoice PDFs. So let's just do one more example. Let's say we want to add in another item here called training. Let's say the price of that product is going to be $2,000 and the quantity is just going to be 1. So that now gives the user the ability to add in whatever items they deem appropriate. Just to give you a sense of the other views here, so we've list, we've gallery, Kanban not applicable, neither is calendar or timeline. Grid could be used. This is actually the format of what's in the data tab itself, but I think list is actually the most useful for our purposes here. Okay, so now let's say we want the user to actually be able to generate a PDF of an invoice. The way we're going to do this is we're going to use an Airtable automation, and we're going to use a third-party tool called DocuPotion. Full disclaimer, we have built DocuPotion. This is a product built by Cranford Tech, but I'm going to show how you can integrate it into Airtable. It's really easy to generate PDFs. If you don't have an account, you need to head to docupotion.com, click on the register sign in button. I'm just going to sign up for an account here in the background. And once you've signed up for an account, you're going to be brought to the DocuPotion dashboard. And you're going to have 50 free PDFs as part of your free trial. After that, you will need to upgrade to a paid plan in order to continue generating PDFs. You can see the very first step is to generate an API key in the My Account tab. So we're going to do that now. The next steps is going to be to design a template in the Templates tab. So let's go on, create a new template. I'm going to call this one Interfaces Invoice. And you can see there's a number of templates we can choose from. We can choose from a blank one, a purchase order, some certificate templates, but for our purposes today, I think this invoice one is going to provide a really nice start point, and we can modify it then as we wish. So I'm going to click create template. And once we do that, we're going to be brought to the template editor. And there's a number of tabs here. The most important one, I think, is probably the preview tab outside of the canvas itself, because that gives you an indication of how your invoice is actually going to look, or whatever PDF you're creating. Now, you'll see at the moment, some of the variables inside here have these kind of squiggly braces or curly braces, and these are used to tell DocuPotion to replace these variables, these data variables, with your own data. In your case, if you're watching this video, your own Airtable data. So the idea is, if we change this text component here from, instead of saying build to John Doe, let's say we change it to build to customer name. Whenever we generate a PDF in our Airtable app here, we're going to replace customer name with Max Verstappen, if Max Verstappen is the active record, or with whatever customer we're doing it for. Now, it's really important that when you put in these curly braces to signify a data variable, that you make sure the name matches exactly what you have in your Airtable database. So we do have in invoices customer name. We also have address, begins with a capital A, and it is case sensitive. So let's put in address. And then we also want to fill out some other fields, specifically around this dynamic table component. So you can see here, you can grab the header row, you can grab the data row, and dynamic table components basically allow you to loop through records and add in as many as you want. So you're not restricted to having just, one record or two. You will have a varying amount depending on the record. So if, for example, Max Verstappen had 4 line items and Lando Norris only had 1, the table will adjust accordingly. It's always going to have only the one data row in the editor, but on the preview, you can see here there's 3 in by default, and you can edit these default placeholder values in the data tab, expanding out the items and just adjusting it here. So what we need to do next is, on this dynamic table component, we need to make 2 changes. The first is to change the data type from the default items to whatever we've called our linked table here. So we've linked in the line items table. So I'm going to simply replace this with line items. I'm then going to replace the names here so they perfectly match what we have in our line items table. So again, capital N for name. Price of product rather than just price. Quantity with a capital Q. And total with a capital T. Perfect. We also have subtotal, tax, and grand total by default. We don't actually need all of them. In our case, we're putting in our grand total from here, and we don't actually need that tax. So I'm just going to get rid of this. And I'm going to move this up a bit. Perfect. And again, just making sure the name matches exactly. I'm going to have a capital G for grand and a capital T for total. Let's just make sure that looks okay in our preview tab. Yeah, again, we're using sample values, so that's to be expected. And I think we're pretty happy with that. You can obviously adjust this template as much as you want. You can create your own template from scratch. You can add in your own components here, but I think that'll do for the purposes of our mini app today. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an Airtable automation that is triggered in our interfaces tab, and it's going to call DocuPotion, generate a PDF, and then return it here for the user. So the first thing I actually need to do is I need to add another element. And this time I'm going to add in the PDF field. And if we click on that, you'll see here we have a number of options: field, carousel, and hero. I think field is probably the nicest from like a UI perspective. So I'm going to add that down here. And we'll close that. And let's just make this a lot smaller because we don't need the line items entry to be that big. Let's grab that. and up there. Yeah, then at least the user can actually see the PDF attachment even a bit more. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to go to add an element again. And this time I'm going to click on all elements. So we're not grabbing something specifically from our table. We're getting one of these all elements, and I'm searching for the button one. I'm going to grab that, and let's put it in just next to the record picker. And if we click on this, and close down this, we have a bunch of things we can do based on this button click. Update record is the default one. That's not really what we want. What we want in our case is to run an automation. Now, you'll see here, whenever I click on choose an automation, we don't have anything yet. So I'm going to click create new automation. I'm going to call this generate invoice PDF. I'm going to continue it in automations. It's going to open up in a new tab. And this automation is going to be run when a button is clicked. And specifically, it's going to be run when the button in our interfaces tab is clicked. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to run script. We're going to be presented with this code editor. And don't worry, you're not going to have to write any code yourself because DocuPotion does all that for us. If I go to my integrations tab in the DocuPotion editor, if I click on Airtable, it's going to generate a script for us. There's full instructions on what you need to do here, but it's really simple. So I think if you follow along, you're going to be able to understand it just fine. The first thing we need to paste in is the table URL that we're generating the PDF from. Now, this may not be the most obvious set of instructions because we're obviously going to be generating the PDF from our interface. But what this really refers to is the table within your base that the PDF attachment field is on. So that's going to be in our case it's going to be from the invoices tab. So I'm going to grab this URL, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in here. PDF attachment field is the field in our table where the PDF is going to be uploaded to. In our case, that's going to be the PDF field. So I'm simply going to type in here PDF. And then we can either override existing attachments when we generate, a second, third, fourth, or whatever it may be. I'm actually going to check this. You could uncheck it and just have multiple PDFs in the same cell, but I'm happy to overwrite existing attachments. I'm then going to click on the generate script button. And this is what I talked about when I said DocuPotion does all the hard work for you. We now have our automation script, and all we need to do is click on copy, go back into our script editor, paste it in there, and click on finish editing. We're going to turn this automation on. We're then going to go back to our interfaces, and what I might just do is close down this tab and then just refresh this one. And then let's go to interfaces, and this time when we click the trigger an automation button, which we should change the name of, we're going to trigger the generate invoice PDF. Let's change that name to create invoice PDF. Let's change it to blue. And I think that's going to be what we need for now. So let's preview this. And let's click on create invoice PDF. It's going to take a bit longer the first time you do it, just as a connection is established with DocuPotion. But in a second here, what we should see is a PDF uploaded to this field here. So let's just wait for this to go through. And we seem to have an issue. Okay, no PDF has been uploaded, but we can debug this really easily by going to the automations tab, clicking on history, and yeah, you can see here it's failed to run. So let's figure out what happened. Our trigger was successful, but there was an issue with the script. Let's take a look at the execution log. This is usually a really good clue as to what went wrong. And let's take a look. Invalid arguments passed to table. Record ID should be a string, not undefined. Okay, I know exactly what this is, and it's a crucial step that I did not talk about. And that's when you're running your script. Let's click on the edit code here. DocuPotion is going to be pulling data from a specific record, but we haven't told DocuPotion exactly how to do that just yet. And what we need to do is we need to add an input here. So I'm going to add an input variable, and the specific input variable we need to add is this record ID. So type it in as exactly as you see here, record underscore ID. And this is going to be linked to the Airtable record ID that is based on the button click. So, if the user's on the Max Verstappen customer, it's going to be linked to that record. If you're on Lewis Hamilton, it's going to be linked to the Lewis Hamilton record. Let's finish editing and let's update. Let's try again in interfaces. We can go to preview mode and let's click our create invoice PDF again. And this time around, you can see we've just got our PDF uploaded. There's a couple things you could change here. I didn't add in any $sign before the totals there or the unit prices. So you could do that in your editor just by putting in beforehand this and this, and then save it down. But that's how you can generate PDFs. And what's really powerful here is we can share this with specific people. So if we click on publish, let's publish it, and let's click on share, we can either invite people by email or we can create an invite link here and send it to people, and they're only going to have access then to the interface. They're not going to be able to, go into your database and make changes there. All they're going to be able to do is select a customer. They're going to be able to add in an item. But yeah, for Lando Norris, let's say you wanted to add in an invoice for a driving lesson, and that would be the bargain price of $50 for one, and another item, let's say a steering wheel, and that's slightly more expensive at $300, and you bought two of them for some reason. Then if you clicked on the create invoice PDF button again, we're going to get a custom PDF just for Lando Norris. Let's open that up. And you can see there those changes we made have come through, and Lando's name is coming through, his address is coming through. And yeah, it's just a great way to allow specific users use your data, add in some of their own data like we're doing here. But again, they can't access the full database. They can't change the name of the customer or the address. And then just one last point, I'm creating a PDF here. This is actually going to be reflected in our data tab. So if I go back to home and I look up, if I go back to view data, you'll see here now we do actually have those two PDFs for Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. So I hope that's been useful. This is how you can create a mini application that allows people to generate invoice PDFs based on your data.